The Sports Renegades podcast on SportsTownChicago.com.
Tonight we're gonna take no prisoners. This time we're gonna live our dream. Tonight the orange and blue delivers. Hard-working town, hard-working team. Tonight the hardwood's burning and the crafts will keep on working. Get behind the orange and blue with all your might. Cavs basketball, tonight's the night. Cavs basketball, tonight's the night.
All right, welcome back to Sports Renegades on SportsTownChicago.com. I'm Ryan Stuprich.
And I'm Ryan Risky.
Yeah, that was the old Cavs fight songs from the 80s and 90s when they just couldn't get past Michael Jordan and the Bulls. They probably played that hoping that they could beat Michael Jordan with that song, but they didn't. And the Bulls have an old song, too, that we played on here before. That's actually a lot better.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's sort of interesting. The Cavaliers, again, we know that they lost that opener to the Bulls, but they've been playing really well ever since.
That's still their only loss.
I think it's still their only loss. They've been mowing teams down pretty much ever since then. So again, it's going to be a tough task, for the Bulls and all the other teams in the Eastern Conference, because when you look at it, there's only a couple teams who have a legitimate shot of competing with the Cavaliers, and I guess the Bulls would be one of those teams. If Milwaukee ever figures it out, I think they're still about a year away from being, a top 3 team in the East. But they're still a pretty good team.
That's not saying much about the East.
No, it really isn't. Indiana, if they ever figure it out, they could be pretty good in the playoffs, like they were a few years ago when they nearly beat the Cavaliers. There's a couple of young teams like Boston that's not too bad. And Miami isn't too bad with Goran Dragic and Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. That's not a bad team. Toronto and Atlanta are pretty good. Yeah, of course, Luol Deng's on that team.
Toronto is just one of those teams that'll make it to the first or second round every year and get knocked out.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Bulls. Same story every year.
The thing with Atlanta is they have a pretty good team, and they play all really well together. They didn't really lose any pieces. And if you remember, they went, they beat the Washington Wizards in the first round. But now I think if the Wizards played Atlanta, that could be even more of a competitive series. The Wizards really aren't that bad.
Yeah, they seem like a team that maybe not good coaching could be holding them back.
Yeah, I don't know how good Randy Whitman is, but he's okay.
Yeah, they've got good. I know Bradley Beal hit that game-winning 3 against the Spurs. Yeah,
he did, and that's that was sort of a nice turning point early in the season for the Wizards. Is now they have some confidence and everything. But yeah, going back to the Bulls, the Bulls again. They're in a tough situation. They're still trying to figure everything out in their first year. There was some sort of rumor, but I don't think it's ever going to come to fruition. It was like DeMarcus Cousins to the Bulls for Doug McDermott, Taj Gibson, and
can you believe just
someone else? I think Joakim Noah was in the trade.
Can you believe that whole situation out there? The head coach and your star player don't like each other, and then it's proven that your general manager is not smart.
Yeah, they're in a bad situation, Sacramento. I feel bad for them because they have really good fan support, and everyone's trying to move that team out of San Francisco, out of Sacramento, I should say. And they've been able to stay, but they haven't been good. They haven't made the playoffs in 10 years, more than 10 years maybe, since they've had Chris Webber and Mike Bibby and some of those other people. They really haven't been very good.
Mike Bibby, that's like an old name.
Yeah, that was even before he was with Atlanta, I think. He was with.
He was good with Atlanta. And,
yeah, he was.
The thing is about the DeMarcus Cousins to the Bulls rumors, like, what can the Bulls give the Kings that they would actually legit want in return?
I don't know. I can't imagine you'd want Joakim Noah or Taj Gibson.
Well, maybe Taj, except that wouldn't be like a headline piece.
Right, and he's not. I mean, Taj is barely worth a start. So
you have to put in McDermott, and I think that's pushing it because McDermott looks like he could be the real deal.
Yeah, I mean, when he's open, he makes his baskets. He's got to work on defense. He has some pretty good driving ability. It's all going to take time, and he might be a bust. He might turn out to be an average player. He's not going to be a star of any
team. The thing
that
won't change is his ability to shoot the ball.
Right, he'll always be able to shoot the ball. He's sort of like a mini version of Mike Dunleavy. Now Dunleavy plays great defense, but
right. I think McDermott will actually be able to develop into a starter. I mean, maybe he'll average like 15 points a game and shoot 45% for threes.
I could see it.
I mean, I don't think he'll be like a star player in the league.
The player that I really like on the Bulls, and he does have some off nights, but I really like Nikola Mirotic. He's one of my favorite players on.
See, that's
team.
another guy you'd have to include in a deal for Cousins. I mean, you'd have to headline it around Mirotic and McDermott. The thing is, like, you can't just go and say, stupid Bulls fans like, we'll give him Noah and Taj or Pau. It's like those aren't guys that the Kings want. They want young talent that could be really good in return for DeMarcus Cousins.
Right, and they're going to want a lot of good things back for DeMarcus Cousins, even though they sort of want him out of there. At least management does. That's going to be
George
tough.
Karl. Did you hear Cousins told their management that he wants George Karl fired or he wants to be traded?
Yeah,
and that doesn't look good when you sign George Karl to a 4-year deal when you've been through like 9 coaches in 12 years.
Right. That's just sort of a bad situation.
And their GM Vlad Divac, I just don't think he's very
Vlad
good
Divac.
at his job. Vlad Divac. I don't think he's that smart. I don't think he's good at his job. I mean, I just.
He was an okay basketball player.
I don't think I don't think that he has what it takes to be an NBA GM.
Right. All right, that's it for the NBA. Let's move on to some Bears talk before we go into break, and then our next segment we will do our picks and everything. Of course, news breaking today is Alshon Jeffrey is questionable yet again. He was unable to practice today due to an ankle injury that he tweaked. I think he tweaked it Tuesday.
It was a groin injury.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. It was a groin injury, not ankle injury. He did have an ankle injury earlier. But
in other news, their defensive tackle, Ego Ferguson, has been suspended for 4 games.
He's the third player this year on the Bears.
I didn't know, like third in like the past 2 weeks.
To be suspended for substance abuse.
Yeah, third in like the past week or 2 weeks. I mean,
it's got to be marijuana.
Yeah, rarely this happens with the Bears. With Lovie Smith, there's never any of this. The Bears players rarely deal with that.
They either have to change the rules so marijuana is legal, like if they do that like nationally or something, or these players just have to stop smoking marijuana during the football season.
Yeah,
I mean 4 games. Now you're out 4 games, and Ego Ferguson's not a bad player either.
And the thing is, for Ego Ferguson, he's kind of living the life. He's on the injured reserve and getting paid for the rest of the season. Now he doesn't get paid for 4 games.
He's probably going to smoke during these 4 games too.
Probably. Another Phil.
Now that he's pissed,
Phil Emery draft pick.
Right. It's another one, and of course, earlier in the season, even before the season started, there was off the field issues when we signed Ray McDonald, and then cut him right away when he ended up being arrested.
Yeah, you could tell George McCaskey was not thrilled with that signing to begin with. When he was released, like minutes after it was reported.
Yeah, I mean that I understand, but I mean you sort of had to know that it was going to come out that he did something wrong and that he wasn't going to be able to play. So why even sign him in the first place, Ryan Pace? That's what I want to know.
I think that was more of a Vic Fangio influence.
That's true. They had the connection there, but
right. The thing that's disappointing about it is that because of that, they couldn't really go and sign Aldon Smith, which that would have been a much better option, much better player, young player, and he hasn't really had any problems yet with Oakland.
Right. Yeah, I mean, on a positive note, Jay Cutler's been playing the best that he's played probably since 2010 or 11.
Since he took him to the NFC Championship game, he's been great.
Right.
I mean, and he's making like throws you hadn't seen him make ever.
And apparently, Matt Forte isn't officially ruled out, but he probably will be ruled out. But he's not officially ruled out for this game, but that's what John Fox likes to do. Hopefully Alshon Jeffrey can play. We could really use him because the Rams, as we know, are a pretty darn good defense. So, and they also play kind of dirty. So you're going to have to hope that Alshon Jeffrey can stay healthy enough to play in this game. Hopefully he's able to, because we could really use him. Because with Cutler throwing the ball so well, it'd be nice to air it down the field to Alshon Jeffrey, so Cutler doesn't get sacked or worse, even get hurt, because St. Louis does some dirty things.
Yeah,
I mean, they knocked out Teddy Bridgewater.
Yeah, Mike Zimmer was furious, the head coach of the Vikings.
I would have been too.
I was watching NFL Network, and they had the sounds of the game, and he was just he wasn't even yelling at the officials. He was having a calm conversation, saying these guys are dirty. Do you see what they're doing to my players?
Well, nationally, a lot of people think St. Louis is a very dirty team, a very dirty defense. It doesn't surprise me. It's St. Louis. I mean, we hate the Cardinals. Might as well hate the Rams too. It's just it's interesting. That they continued to get away with a lot of stuff. Although the player that hit Teddy Bridgewater was fined today. I don't know who it was.
Yeah, and yet Aqib Talib got suspended a game for poking someone, and the guy that destroyed Bridgewater didn't get suspended.
No, but he had to play he had to pay a fine though.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Everyone. It's I want to know what the average number of players that get fined every week is. I mean, it's got to be at least 5 or 6 or 7.
Right, and then of course,
I mean, I'm sure the minor fines, something that you wouldn't expect, or a player you've never heard of, those don't even go reported.
Meanwhile, Greg Hardy's still playing in the NFL, which is mind-boggling. But
yeah, every team except the Cowboys would have drafted him, and I love how Cowboys are defending it, saying that just his off-field issues have nothing to do with his on-field issues.
Here's the best thing: a judge ruled that he was found guilty and that he did the things that he did, and people still try to defend him when it's been out in the public, and you can read documents and in court documents and hearings that he was found guilty. Mm-hmm. And people continue to defend him, which doesn't make any sense.
And then there's those pictures that were released, and the Cowboys are like, "Oh, we didn't have access to that when we signed him." It's
public access.
Yeah, what about now? What about now after it came to the public? Are you going to cut him, Jerry Jones? Probably not.
No, he's going to give him a lollipop, and he'll be a captain, and he'll do like what Mark Trestman did with Jeremiah Ratliff because he was afraid of him.
Mark Trestman, man, I've never hated a man more than him, except with the Greg Hardy thing. Jerry Jones will probably give him a contract extension.
Probably. Jerry Jones doesn't really find anything wrong with Greg Hardy, which is he's the only person in the world that hasn't.
He probably thinks that Greg Hardy has done no wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so stupid. So before we go to break, what do you think we're going to see in this game against the Rams? And we'll talk about it more when we make our picks too. But it's just a quick recap.
I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of Jay Cutler scrambling.
I have a feeling we're going to see that too, because St. Louis is pretty good, especially up front.
I have a feeling that we're going to see Tavon Austin make some big plays against a terrible Bears defense.
Yeah, that's true. Especially, I mean, our cornerbacks are just horrible for the most part.
Yeah, the cornerback with the defensive backs, with the exception of Adrian Amos, are terrible.
Yeah, I agree.
Adrian Amos is looking like a gem that they got in the 5th round. I mean, people are already comparing him to Mike Brown with how hard he is in his awareness on the field and attacking the ball. It's great. I mean, could you imagine if they had him instead of Chris Conte a couple of years ago when Randall Cobb ran past him?
Right, exactly. That would have been possibly not a touchdown. Hopefully,
the Bears might have made the playoffs that year.
They might have. They wouldn't have gone very far, but they could have made the playoffs. That's for sure. And if you look at all their losses, especially the last 2, I mean, it's really kind of a bummer. I mean, not that we were expecting much this season, but when they won those 2 games against Oakland and Kansas City, you're like, okay, something might be brewing here. Maybe we won't be looking at such a horrible season. I know we might not get a high draft pick, but it's always fun when the Bears win. And then you lose in overtime to the Lions, which you should have won, and then you really should have won 2 weeks ago against Minnesota, 23-20 loss.
Sherrick McManus didn't fall down, or Jeremy Langford didn't drop a pass.
Right, and I mean, you did beat the Chargers. You should have beat them by a higher margin. Robbie Gould missed 2 field goals, which is almost unacceptable. Really.
You could have if it wasn't for injuries, the Chargers could have won that game because their wide receiving core was Stevie Johnson and then 2 guys that had no previous history in the NFL.
Right, and then how about that catch by Zach Miller? I mean, unbelievable.
That was one of my favorite throws I've seen Jay Cutler make.
It was a bullet.
He doesn't throw, and a lot of times he just will lob that up and it'll get intercepted. It was nice seeing him throw a dart right in there.
And Zach Miller's wide open. Nobody's expecting him to make the big big play. He makes a nice catch. I think it was almost thrown too hard because he had to, catch it. He tried to catch it with one hand. It bounced off his hand. Then he secured it with the other hand and fell right into the end zone there.
Except that's kind of like a statement throw. Like they're like Cutler saying, "Hey, I can do this."
Right. And then upcoming schedule for the Bears. We'll go to break in just a minute. Upcoming